Sandy Summers.
And I'm Jenny Johnson. Welcome to News Center
9384, Japan. We just received breaking news on the Sino-Japanese War. Japan has defeated China in the scramble to gain influence over Korea.
In case you have not been following the war for the past 8 months, here's a brief summary of what led to the war and what happened during the war.
By the time the Sino-Japanese War had broken out in 1894, Japan had already transformed into an industrialized and educated nation. Japan had strengthened its economy and feudal system through the Meiji Restoration when Emperor Meiji came into power. China, however, had taken a turn for the worse. As a result of the Opium Wars, China's economy and military had diminished. The Beiyang fleet had been in decline since 1889 when the Dowager Empress Cixi used money meant to support the navy to purchase luxuries for herself. By contrast, the Japanese fleet was taught and disciplined, and the Beiyang fleet could not compare. A rebellion had broken out in Korea, and China had gone into the country to try to help settle the conflicts. Japan used this rebellion as an excuse to set up its navy in and around Korea to prepare to start a war with the Chinese. The Sino-Japanese War was a war for territory. Both Japan and China wanted Korea in their spheres of influence. Because the Chinese fleet, commanded by Admiral Ting Zhang, outnumbered the Japanese fleet, commanded by Vice Admiral Ito Sukuyeki, by a ratio of 4-1, many of the Western countries believed that China would come out victorious. However, Japan surprised them when they emerged with a better prepared and better disciplined navy than that of China's. The main battle of the Sino-Japanese War was the Battle of Yalu in September 1894. The Japanese had already been occupying the Korean peninsula near Pyongyang, and the fleet destroyed all of the Chinese ships in the harbor. Japanese Marshal Yamagata surrounded the city of Pyongyang and defeated the Chinese defenders from September 15th to September 16th. The following day, 25 ships from the Beiyang fleet sailed into Korea Bay to cover a troop landing when they were met by the Japanese fleet of 21 ships. Admiral Ting Zhang opened fire right away and destroyed part of the fleet, as well as inflicted blast damage on himself. The Chinese had to fight without their commander, and their ships were slower than those of the Japanese. Effective ammunition failed to explode on impact. The Japanese were able to disable 8 and sink 5 of the Chinese ships, while the Chinese only damaged 4 of the Japanese ships. On land, General Yamagata led his Japanese troops to the Yalu River, the border between Korea and Manchuria. The Japanese troops were able to siege Port Arthur on September 21st, and once they were inside the walls of Port Arthur, they ransacked the city and looted it of its valuables to avenge supposed ill treatment of the Japanese prisoners of war. The riot lasted for 3 days. Admiral Ting's forces retreated to their base at Liukang Island in Weihiwei Harbor, while the Japanese troops continued to wreak havoc in the Shandong Peninsula. The Japanese bombarded the Weihiwei Harbor, and on February 12, 1895, Ting surrendered the remnants of his fleet. Admiral Ting refused asylum in Japan offered by Admiral Ito, and Ting and several other members of his staff committed suicide instead. The Chinese sued for peace in March 1895. In the Treaty of Shimonoseki, the Japanese were granted Port Arthur, the Liaodong Territory, and Taiwan. The independence of Korea was to be recognized. China was to pay 200 million kuping in war reparations, and China was to grant Japan most favored nation treatment. This treaty ended the First Sino-Japanese War.
Hello, Sandy Summers here. I am here with Ito Hirobumi, Prime Minister of Japan and key figure in the victory of the Sino-Japanese War. He is here to tell us about why Japan wanted to conquer the Korean peninsula. Konnichiwa, Ito Hirobumi. So why did you want Korea?
私たちはちょうど私たちの天皇への電力供給を復元し、我々の経済と軍国主義的なパワーを強化した明治維新の出ていました。国は私たちの帝国の拡大に有用な天然資源を有しており、我々は中国の帝国は我々が言ったよりも韓国をより詳細に権力と影響力を持っていたくなかったので、私たちは韓国の制御を獲得したかった。
What did you demand in your treaties for Korea and China?
韓国に関しては、国が完全に中国から自分自身を分離し、中国は自国以上それ以上の影響力を持つことができないことを要求した。戦争の割に、我々は中国が併合自体に韓国を許可することを要求し、我々は台湾の所持、大湖島、ポートアーサーと両東半島を売ることを要求した。
Thank you so much for speaking with us, Prime Minister. And now over to interviewer Boz Wolf.
I'm here with Li Heng-cheng, lead statesman of the late Qing Empire. He managed the Chinese troops during the Sino-Japanese War. Ni hao, Li.
Ni hao.
Did you think you had the advantage during the war?
是，中国军队有超过60万人，而日本只有大约250万人。我们以及许多西方国家认为中国将取得胜利，但可惜我们已经被削弱的鸦片战争和不能克服我们的经济和军国主义的缺点。
Are you discouraged now that you have lost all this territory?
我们将加强我们的军事和回收。什么是正当我们尽快？日本将不知道什么是未来。
This has been News Center 9384 Japan. The best coverage of Japanese news today, yesterday, and tomorrow. Tune in later to hear more news about the Sino-Japanese War. This is Sandy Summers signing off. See you next time.